Okay, so this is extensive reading, the solution for everything. A little bit about me. My name's Chris Fry. I trained at International House in London way before you were born, probably, and then spent a year in Madrid teaching in a little language school where you sat around a table, basically. Um, then I came to Barcelona, spent 5 years at the Escuela Oficial Drassanes, and then 38 years at the British Council, Amigo. And I retired 7 years ago. Now, during my training at International House and in the first 2 years of teaching, I don't think I'd ever heard of extensive reading. But then I think the second year of working at the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, I started lending novels that I had around the house to my students to read at home. And then I got the idea of buying guided readers for the lower level students who couldn't possibly have read the novels. So that for me was my first experience of extended reading, although the term extended reading I didn't even know about. So what is extensive reading? So it's an approach to language learning that encourages students to read a large number of books or other reading materials. I mean, it could be comics, um, but it could be technical journals as well, I suppose. But it has to be relatively easy for them to understand. So ideally, the books should be easier than their current reading level so that they can read quickly without having to look up words in a dictionary. And you'll see later on how I apply this particular concept of being easier than their current reading level. Um, I took that quote from the Extensive Reading Foundation website, and this is also taken from the same place, and it includes this sort of acronym READ, read quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension so they don't need a dictionary. Um, so that's quite cute. Um, for to my mind, it's missing one element, which is choice. That students should be able to choose what they read. It shouldn't be the teacher tells them to read this book and then that book. So what I want to talk about today are theories that support extensive reading, and then what I learned from running class libraries for 40 years, and then Oxford Reading Club, extensive reading the easy and cheap way. So theories supporting extensive reading. Stephen Krashen is the first name that comes to mind. Paul Nation is also a very influential person in the field of vocabulary learning and extensive reading. And Christine Nuttall wrote a book way back in 1982 on reading. And we'll see a quote from her, which I think is very apposite. And Julian Bamford and Richard R. Day have published extensively about extensive reading. Um, and certainly Richard R. Day is active even today, giving webinars on uh, extensive reading. So Krashen's theory of compelling comprehensible input states that the only way to acquire language is to read or listen to language you understand, because it's only a little higher level than your own language ability. He put this little formula, I+1. He said the input should be your your interlanguage level plus a little bit more. Mm-hmm. That appears to conflict a little bit with the idea about extensive reading being at a slightly lower level than your reading ability. But we'll talk about it later. Um, Paul Nation states that a well-balanced course should consist of 4 equal strands. And the first one he mentions is meaning-focused input. That's reading or listening to compelling, comprehensible input. I've stuck in there the part in brackets, but he's basically saying the same thing as Stephen Krashen. The other strands are meaning-focused output, so that's writing and speaking communicatively. The third is the strand that most of us have spent our lives concentrating on, which is language-focused learning. So, you know, teaching the second conditional and things like that. And then the fourth one is also an area which I feel is underexploited, which is fluency development. It's not enough to know the second conditional. You've got to be able to use the second conditional fluency where appropriate. So you've got to have practice in speaking fluently, writing fluently, reading fluently. Listening fluently is quite a difficult concept, but still, I think it all stands there. But the first one he mentions is reading or listening to compelling, comprehensible input. Now, why do extensive reading? This is a quote from Christine Nuttall that I must have absorbed back in the day when I read her book on teaching reading skills in a foreign language. It wasn't specifically about EFL. What she said is the best way to improve our knowledge of a foreign language is to go and live among its speakers. The next best way is to read extensively in it. And I absolutely believe in that. It's far cheaper to read extensively in English than to go and live for a couple of years in England. This is a quote from Richard R. Day, and I just read the part in bold. We also know that reading extensively helps increase oral fluency. That's listening and speaking abilities. Now, this may seem surprising that reading a lot and quickly actually helps oral skills, but research has been done to show that this is the case. So, what did I learn from running class libraries for 40 years? So, class libraries for me are pretty well synonymous with extensive reading. The first thing I think is deciding what level students should start at. The second is helping students choose what to read. Then setting targets for students and giving them feedback on how well they're achieving those targets. And it may seem trivial, but bringing the books to class every day. Students need to be reminded constantly of the importance of extensive reading. So this is a chart that I prepared when I was working, and I've slightly adapted it to incorporate Oxford Bookworm's levels on the top line there. So you've got Oxford Bookworm starter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 2 more levels, level X, which is beyond the range of Oxford Bookworms, and then O is original versions. And below that, I've put the approximate number of words that are used in books at those levels, and then the CEFR levels there. And what I've put here is the range of books that students in different courses should be able to read. So let's look at the starting level. So if you look at pre-intermediate, which is A2, I'm basically suggesting that they should start a little bit lower at the sort of A1, A2, that sort of A1 and a half. And similarly, at intermediate, which is B1, not start at B1, but start like half a level below A2, B1. Um, and the same for all the levels. So that's the sense in which I agree with the earlier quotes about extensive reading, that students should be reading at a level lower than their ability so that they can read really fast. They'll still encounter new language, of course, just as we encounter words we've never seen before when we read in our own language. Um, the second thing that I think I've learned is that teachers need to help students choose what to read. And students know what they like and what they don't like, but I think the teacher can help guide them towards choosing books that they will probably enjoy. But with the instruction that if they don't enjoy it, just to give it back and choose another book. So what I did was I decided to try to classify all the readers in my collection by genres. So I examined all the genres used in the publishers' catalogues and produced this conglomerate list. So adventure, spy, thriller's got 3 words there because 3 different publishers use those terms, but I put them together as a sort of generic adventure. Um, Biographies, famous people, true stories. It's the same thing pretty well, but they reflect the different wordings of the genre for different publishers. Now, if you like adventure stories, but you don't like biographies, then obviously you would prefer to read an adventure story and vice versa. So make a catalogue of all the books, organizing them by genre. At the beginning, when I introduced my class library, I got my students to start off by doing a questionnaire about which genres they liked most. So the same genres that I showed before are listed there, and students were asked to indicate with a 5 that they really liked that a lot, or down to a 1 where they really hated that sort of thing. You can see some of my students actually doing that. Here's a catalogue, an example of a catalogue. It's about Oxford Bookworm level 2, that sort of thing. And you can see there's adventure, spy, thriller there, and biographies there. So if a student wants to read adventure stories, which my granddaughter chose as one of the genres that she is interested in, you've only got to read through the blurbs of that little group of 9 books. Now, we'll see later on that if there is a very large number of books at your level, it's even more important to have genres that you can home in on. Now, the third thing that I wanted to include here is the whole idea of setting targets for students. I told my students that they should finish the book within a week. Of course, the books are very small, and half an hour's reading would probably enable them to give the book back after a week. And very often students gave them back 2 days later when we had the next class. But I set them targets in terms of levels and in terms of quantity. So this is giving some feedback about levels. And this was at the end of the second term with an intermediate group. I showed them historically what the distribution of where students had got to was. So you can see a lot of students had got to level 4 in Oxford Bookworms. Some had got to level 5. A few had got to level 6, and even a very small number beyond that. But I asked them to compare their own class, which is the graph on the right, with the historic one. And I really like the one on the right. We got the vast majority of people are at level 4 or 5, just a couple, perhaps even one person there down at level 3, and no high flyers. Well, it was a small group, so you can see it was what four. It was only 9 students. With a larger population, you'd get a greater spread. So I showed students graphs like this in class to encourage them, to pat them on the back about having reached levels 4 or 5, a little bit of a chivvy for the person who was down at level 3. But I also gave feedback on the number of books. Here's an example from an FC class at the end of the first term, where I'm showing the distribution of the percentage of students who read no books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 and 8 books. And obviously, if you've read 7 and 8 books, you can think, well, bravo, you've done really well. And if you've read 5, you can be pretty happy because you're in the largest group of people. And then I pointed out that this year, the average number of books was 4, and in the previous year, it had been 5. So, come on, pull your socks up a bit. And this is another form of gamification, possibly, sort of incentive to students for their reading. So I sent them personally a badge on, I can't remember what we were using, WhatsApp or Edmodo or something. I sent them badges saying 10 books read, congratulations, things like that. And then 15, 25 books. And 25 books was not that rare. Another thing that I gave was a little sort of analysis of a group of 6 people who'd already read 15 books long before the course ended. And I was saying, you've already read 15 books. What's your target for June? 25, 30? Well, and I said that this was like a trivial thing, bringing the books to class every day. This is what I did. I brought in some sort of box like this with the readers at one level at the beginning of the course and a number of levels later on in the course. These were all Oxford Bookworm level 3. So that was, well, it was probably an intermediate group, that one. We'll see when we talk about Oxford Reading Club that you won't be bringing the books to class every day because they're online, and you've got to deal with that. So, Oxford Reading Club. I discovered Oxford Reading Club basically during COVID. Oxford University Press gave free access to a huge number of readers during COVID, and I was able to use some of those with my granddaughter on Zoom, and I was so impressed with that I paid for access to 2 levels. And then I discovered Oxford Reading Club, where paying for a similar amount of money, you had access to 700 books, or 700 or more books. It's a library. The Oxford Reading Club is a library. It's a library of different series. Some series are for pre-intermediate, some for primary, pre-primary, primary, secondary, and adults. The adults range in difficulty from pre-A1 up to C1. The primary probably from pre-A1 up to B1. For pre-primary, there are 3 series, I think. There are 127 readers to choose from. So students are going to need some guidance about which books to read. It's all online, so you're not bringing the books to class. So you're going to have to demonstrate in the classroom which ones they should select from. Apart from those 3 series, which are only for pre-primary, there are another 3 series that span pre-primary and primary. So perhaps add another 50 books to that. You're up to, well, nearly 200 books for pre-primary. And remember, probably 50 or so for primary as well. For primary, there are 4 series with 183 readers to choose from, plus the 50 or so from the series which span the 2 levels. And they range right from pre-A1, the lowest possible level, very simple, right up to B1, which is, well, pre-first certificate. For secondary and adults, there are only 2 series, Dominoes and Bookworms. And I think really Dominoes is more for secondary ESSO, that sort of thing. And secondary Bachillerato, probably Bookworms, and Bookworms for adults. There are a lot of books, 273 books to choose from, and they range from A1 up to C1. I think the idea is that after C1 in C2, students really should be managing original versions. So with Oxford Reading Club, the same 4 points: finding where to start, finding what to read, setting targets and giving feedback, and bringing the books to class every day or something equivalent. And deciding where to start, my advice would be use my chart. If they're an A2 class, start at A1 plus, not A2. Always make sure that you start at a level that's sufficiently low for all students to be able to read the books. The faster students will read more quickly, they'll advance through the levels more quickly. Remember, I had, I think, 5 levels that some of my students would go through in an annual course. Oxford University Press have also got, quite apart from Oxford Reading Club, they've got some level tests. So if you take these level tests, so, okay, you have a go at level 1, and if you get 80%, then that's probably the right level for you. If you get much more, 95%, that sort of thing, then maybe you should try a level 2 test. And if you get 80 there, that's probably your level. I feel that this is probably better than the little test that is available inside Oxford Reading Club. Now, when you choose the books, and I'm always suggesting that the teacher should be guiding students towards which series to work on. So supposing you've said to your students, okay, I'd like you to work with Bookworms Starter. I think there are 17 books there, and on Oxford Reading Club, they're just listed there. I don't think they're alphabetical. I don't know what order they're in, but there's no mention of genre. My idea is that you really need to make a genre catalogue of that level. And I use the genres that Oxford Graded Readers use, which are very similar to the ones that I'd used years before. Classics is not really a very useful genre because you could have a classic war story and a classic love story, and they would attract completely different people. But you can see they're basically similar to what I had. One little difference, I would say, is that human interest in the genres for Oxford Graded Readers includes love stories. I had human interest as one category and romance as another. So here is a catalogue that I've made with Oxford Bookworm starters, and there are only 4 genres there: thriller and adventure, crime and mystery, human interest, and fantasy and horror. I'm going to make a new version of this because I would prefer the genres to be in alphabetical order, and I would prefer there to be pictures as well. I'll show you another catalogue I've prepared. This is for Oxford Bookworms Level 1. And here you can see the pictures and the blurbs. And this time I have got the genre in alphabetical order. Crime and mystery is first, fantasy and horror is second, human interest is third. But this is what I wanted to say, that at this level there are 51 books. How do you choose between 51 books? You're spoilt for choice. It's like the yogurt counters in a big supermarket. There are 20 meters of yogurts, and you want to choose just one. And the genre catalogues really help with that. So my granddaughter also mentioned crime and mystery as one of the areas that she liked, and she chose Sherlock Holmes 2 Plays as one of the ones she would like to read. But you can see it's quite a long list. So we're up to 6 pages there, 9 pages, 10. The other day, I looked at this on a mobile phone and it looked really fantastic. I've got a couple of tweaks I'm going to make it better, but I think it'll work very well on a mobile phone. So, as I said before, the Oxford Reading Club is a collection of different series. So each series was originally published as an electronic book, and they have a number of steps. Some of the books actually have all 5 steps. They're mostly the lower level books. The Bookworms and Dominoes don't have all these 5 steps, but all the books have step 3. Step 3 is the vital one. It's reading the text silently, with or without the book being read aloud to you at the same time. You can choose. Sometimes you can actually choose between British and American pronunciation, although usually you only have one language there. Some of them are read really well. I can think of one, The Age of Innocence, where I was so impressed with the way it was read aloud. Some of the others, yeah, it's okay. They're nicely read, but this was a very special one. Now, let's just look at some of the other steps there. Some of the lower levels have pre-reading vocabulary, and that's vocabulary recognition. You'll hear a word, see it written down, and then have 4 pictures, and you have to choose the pictures. It's not something I would want to spend a lot of time on. The second one is very nice, but I only saw it in one level, I think. It gave you the chance to listen to the book being read aloud without you seeing the text, but you could see all the illustrations. I thought that was quite nice because it's more like extensive listening than extensive reading. The 4th step I was very disappointed with. In some of the books, you're invited to practice repeating about 5 sentences, and the idea is you're imitating the example recording. I played around with this, and whatever I said, even if I said completely different sentences, it always said, "Good job," and then took me to the next sentence. I'll show you later an alternative if you want to do some reading aloud of sentences. And the final step there, the ones that I saw tended to be being able to spell the new vocabulary. So to my granddaughter, I said, forget the other steps, just do step 3. Read the text silently, or if you prefer, read it aloud, or if you want to, just listen to it. This is something I only discovered the other day, and it is quite subtle. Look, in this book, I've done step 3, and the other steps are not available. Now, in this book, Schools, in the Read and Discover series, I've done the listen to it without seeing the text and the reading one, but I haven't done the preparatory vocabulary work, the reading of sentences, and the writing of vocabulary, spelling of vocabulary. But all of those are available. It's quite a subtle difference. You can see it is just visible there, and here it's even less visible. Well, let's look at one of the alternatives to step 4. How well do you pronounce these sentences? I took the 5 sentences from the book Camouflage, which I'm a great fan of, and I tried to use voice typing on um, on WhatsApp. And what I got was, here's a stick insect. Now that's the correct sentence, and that was voice typed by playing the recording. Then I tried to get it. He's a stick insect. He's a stick. No, that's what it was interpreted as. And it took me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attempts to get here's a stick insect. And I never got it right. So I gave up and I moved on to the next sentence. And I was much more successful there. Let's find a caterpillar. The spider hides on flowers. The frog lives in a rainforest. And it looks the same as the stones. I got all of those at the first attempt. I'd be interested to see how learners do on that. I hope it wouldn't be too frustrating. Before I actually take you to look at a live page of Oxford Reading Club, I just want to go through 1 or 2 of the things that it offers. Apart from giving you a catalogue of books to choose from, they also are monitoring your reading. So you can get a monthly report. On the sort of home page, on the web page, you get a sort of simplified monthly report, which just tells you how many books you've read, how long you read that month, and how many words you've read. And it's pretty easy to make a calculation of your reading speed. Yeah, when I did this on May the 9th, my reading speed, which is the number of words divided the number of minutes, was 239 words per minute. If you look at the 3 readings in April, the 3 calculations I made, it would give the impression that I was getting faster and faster and faster. Of course, this is a false impression. What it really is that I was reading more and more and studying less and less. Now, I'm going to go and show you in a moment live on Oxford Reading Club, but I said that bringing the books to class every day is something you're not going to do if you're using Oxford Reading Club, which is online. It's very cheap. It's, I think, 26 euros a year, and I think it can be cheaper than that if a whole school adopts it. So how can you keep students engaged with the idea of extensive reading? Well, the first thing that came to my mind was just reserve 5 minutes every day for students to talk about the books they've read. I remember doing this years ago with a much more advanced class, a post-first certificate. And I mean, they, at the beginning of each class, they were invited to talk about the books they'd read and were giving back. And these were mostly original novels, original versional novels, but they'd also been to see original versional films and had been to plays sometimes or even concerts. And so on occasions, they would talk for half an hour about what they'd been doing in English. And 5 minutes would be enough usually. So ask them to post it to a class WhatsApp every time they finish a book, giving the title of the book and the level, giving it a rating, and a one-sentence comment. I had separate groups for different levels of books. So readers of level 3 would only get comments about books from level 3. So some way of doing that, I think, would be an interesting idea. And I used the student ratings to eliminate books which were not universally unpopular, but on aggregate were unpopular. Now, these are a couple of ideas that Richard Day put forward, and I saw this in a fabulous video I watched a week or so ago. He says you get the students to prepare a 3-minute oral report on the book they've just read or their favourite book. In pairs, they give their partners their report for 3 minutes, and then vice versa. But then you operate the 3-2-1 technique, which is that the first time the students do the task, they have 3 minutes to do it. The second time, they only have 2 minutes. And the third time, they have to do the same task in 1 minute. So it's trying to build up their fluency. And this idea has been around for a long time. Many people have put it forward. So students work with a new partner and they have to do it in 2 minutes. Then they get a third partner and they have to do it in 1 minute. So another idea of his, which I liked, was this. After reading a book, students select a passage from the book that they like. They rehearse reading it aloud at home, and then in class they say a few words about the book, read aloud the passage that they like, and then explain why they liked it. And teachers should warn them not to read the last page of the book. No spoilers, please. Okay, we'll come back to this later. What I'd like to do now is to look at Oxford Reading Club and show you live well, okay, so I've got to go back to here. So my library is a bit like the home page. When you arrive there, it says, oh gosh, I've got a new medal, Master of Persistence level 6. Oh wow, okay. So this, you're checking in. This is where it registers that you've done some reading today. Although of course I haven't done any reading yet. Check my attendance. So okay, and you can see on the web, this is what it looks like. It's more difficult to show you what it looks like on a mobile phone or a tablet. It works brilliantly on a tablet, and I use it frequently on my mobile phone when I'm traveling on public transport. But let's concentrate on what it looks like on a web page. Look, here's the monthly report I talked about there. Oh, wow, I've read 13 books this month now, 304 minutes and 61,000 words. So I could calculate my speed in words per minute again. Okay. Then you've got the books here. At the moment, it's on all books. Yeah. Let's look down. There are also study badges. In study badges, you get badges for various things you do. You saw I got one for persistence there. Let's have a look at study badges. So there's my new badge, Master of Persistence, level 6. I had Master of Reading level 5, but I've got to get 234 minutes more to get the next level. And I don't know how motivating these sort of badges are. I remember years ago using Duolingo, I got kind of into the business of earning lingots and things like that. Okay, you can study vocabulary using this, although I'm not very keen on it. The study calendar just tells you how many days you've actually connected, um, and the notifications are pretty similar to the badges. They tell you what you've done. You can see here that I completed a particular book there, doing all 5 steps. So let's go back and look at the most interesting one, which is the report. So here's my monthly report. It's got my name on it. It's got the number of study days this month and last month. It's got the number of books read this month and last month. It's got the daily average study time this month and last month, and total study time as well. Gosh, I did a lot of reading last month. And the number of words. Um, the number of words mounts up. I had a star student who read 200,000 words in pre-intermediate and 300,000 words in intermediate. As a result of that, she was able to read original versions before the end of her intermediate course. Um, it tells you the days that you've studied. So I've studied more on Wednesdays and Thursdays than any other day. And believe it or not, at 8 o'clock in the morning, I don't believe that. 10 o'clock I can believe. I think it must have got the time wrong somewhere there. Um, and this is which series you've read. So we've got Dominoes, the yellow one, because I've read a lot of those recently. Um, my daughter is studying ESO. My granddaughter is studying ESO. And Bookworms was quite a large proportion. And the last 6 books you've read are pictured here. I think 6 is a good number because not many of your students are going to read more than 6 per month. Yeah. Um, the final line is a graph for books read throughout the year. And you can see I didn't read very much in the first 3 months, but once my proposal for this talk had been given, I read a lot more. I did also read last year. So the total number of books read is 41, and I've read 26 this year. So I read quite a few the previous year, but that was working with my granddaughter, I think. Okay, so let's go back. So what I want to do is to show you a particular book, Camouflage. Um, Camouflage is one of these books that has got all 5 steps. So very quickly, I'd like to go through the 5 steps. The first one was recognition of vocabulary that is going to come up in the book. Let me see how that goes.
Ready. Go. Stick.
Okay, so that's it.
Stick. Same.
More
Same.
difficult for that. Nouns are easier than
Ladybug.
adjectives. Ladybug. Okay, so it's American English.
Ladybug.
Okay,
Stripes.
I don't know whether this is going to be necessary. my tendency has been to not use this and just hope that in the context the student will understand it. And this was a thing I said that I thought was rather nice, that you can listen to the story without seeing the text. I think here you can choose British or American. I don't know. Oh, you can, yeah.
Chapter 1. Camouflage. Animals use camouflage to hide from other animals. This tiger is using camouflage to hide in the grass. The tiger has fur on its body. The fur has stripes.
Now, you can see that that is quite a lot more difficult than reading the book, seeing the text. I had a student many years ago who worked, I think, in Vic, she said. She was a judge or something. And she was an avid reader of graded readers, but she borrowed a slightly lower level to listen to in her car on the journey to Vic and back every day. So I think that's how I would use this sort of thing. So when a student's got well beyond this level, which is probably sort of A2 in B1, then that could be done there. But it's a lovely book, this one on camouflage. And I think it would be great, not for extensive reading, but for a sort of CLIL class. Here you can see the standard step. This is step 3. And here you've got the book. You've got a double page there. You can do various things. You can look at all the pages. If you want to go back to a page, that's the easiest way to do it. Here you've got a dictionary. Here, if you've added words taken from the dictionary to the words you want to learn, you can look at them there. You can make notes there, written ones there, or you could leave audio notes there. But this is the most important one to my mind.
Chapter 7. Is it a leaf? What's this? Is it a leaf? No, it's an insect called a katydid. It's amazing. It looks the same as a leaf. Here's another insect. It's called a leaf insect. When it moves, it looks the same as a leaf in the wind. The leaf insect can have holes in its body.
I used level 4 for the speed. I found the top level there sounded a bit unnatural. Once again, you could choose between British or American on this book. On most books, you either have one or the other. I think that's one of the really useful things. And if you've got it here.
Chapter 8. What is it? Here's a stick insect. It looks the same as a small stick.
Oh, that's a really bad example. So let's go from there. Once you've got it
Chapter
on
2. Animal homes. Chapter 3. Winter and summer.
you just move on to the next page and it
In
continues
winter,
reading
there's
aloud.
lots of snow and ice in very cold.
Okay, you saw there that there were some exercises, and this is one of the problems. Well, no, this is a feature of most readers nowadays. Most readers have got text and exercises. The concept of extensive reading is basically to do the reading and not to do the exercises. In some series, the number of pages of exercises is the same as or even more than the number of pages of text. To me, I would say forget the exercises. It's better to read another book than to spend half an hour doing all those wretched exercises. That's my view of extensive reading. Of course, if you're using these books for intensive reading, that's another matter. But to my mind, Oxford Reading Club is an ideal vehicle for extensive reading. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Oh, okay, we're not getting that on the right page there. Okay, so there we are. So extensive reading, the solution for practically everything. It will help your students with their reading, with their vocabulary, with their writing, with their listening and their speaking, and with their grammar. I mean, familiarity with grammatical forms is built up by encountering them hundreds and thousands of times. I've created a folder on Google Drive called Extensive Reading. Inside it, there's a folder called IELT, so Innovate ELT 2023 Extensive Reading. And this presentation is there, as well as other materials referred to in the talk. For example, the genre catalogues that I've made. So you can either copy this short code here, or you can scan the QR code and you'll have access to all of those. Eventually, the recording that I'm making now of this talk will also be there, or at least a link to it will be there. Okay, so I hope that's been useful. Oxford University Press are offering an extended free trial to anyone attending this talk. And if you use the code given to you here, you'll be able to experiment with Oxford Reading Club for a period of time with your students. This same code can be given to your students, so the whole class can experiment with it with you, and you can see how it goes. I hope that you'll find it sufficiently useful to want to do it on a much larger scale at the beginning of next academic year. Maybe you can persuade your school to take up the idea. If you want any help on any aspect of extended reading, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Doing very well here. Okay, so we're back there.